We start our conversation with Scott Lincicome. He is with Republicans Fighting Tariffs, and according to the Wall Street Journal, a poll shows the president's handling of the economy at 50%. That's above his overall rating of 43%. But the president is underwater when respondents are asked about his trade policy. And this is something that, of course, the president is steadfast upon. Ross Duth out of the New York Times says that the president can't quit tariffs because his other populist promises are broken. He has to keep this one. But what will it do to the economy? And many GOP stalwarts don't like this particular part of the president's approach, and one of those is our guest, Scott Lincicome. What do you think, Scott, about where the president is going with this and the repercussions potentially for the United States and world economies?
Right. Well, I'm really hoping that he puts policy and principle above politics. I understand Ross Douthat's point about the need to keep a campaign promise, but unfortunately, the results so far on this particular campaign promise on these tariffs is not very good. We've seen, tariffs implemented on steel and aluminum that has not only hurt a lot of American manufacturers who use steel and aluminum, including a lot of oil and gas companies there in Louisiana, for example, but also has immediately led to retaliation by some of our closest trading partners like the Europeans, the Canadians, and Mexico. And that has hurt a lot of American farmers and a lot of exporters. And the president's solution so far has been to actually bail out the farmers with another $12 billion in subsidies. So I'm really hoping that the politics don't dictate the president's decisions here and that he instead changes course.
At this point, it doesn't look like he's moving in that direction, though.
No, it doesn't. And however, I think we can be heartened a little bit by last week's handshake deal with the European President Juncker. That was the first time we actually saw the president step back a little bit from protectionist promises and instead look to find an off-ramp, at least for the tariffs on some of our closest allies. Now, there's nothing been agreed yet there with the Europeans. All the tariffs remain in place. But at least they're actually talking about getting rid of them. And that's a good first step.
Here in Louisiana, you're in North Carolina, and that state went for Donald John Trump. In Louisiana, we went even bigger, and all but one of the congressional members is a Republican. And the Republicans, I would think, many don't agree with the president on his trade policy when it comes to tariffs, but nonetheless, they're not saying anything. When will that change, or will it change?
I hope it changes soon, but let's face it, political reality is pretty darn strong this time of year. We're heading into the midterm elections, and President Trump carries a lot of weight with Republicans. You just mentioned that Wall Street Journal poll. That poll and others show that even though Republicans want lower taxes generally and are the party of smaller government and typically the party of free trade, Republican voters support the president on tariffs. And all of a sudden, Democrats, who have traditionally been the protectionist party, are now anti-tariffs. So it's a really tough spot for Republican politicians. They don't agree with the president's tariffs on principle. Many have spoken out. They've threatened to curtail the president's authority there because Congress, as you might know, has the official constitutional authority over trade, Article 1, Section 8. And they could reclaim that authority through legislation. But, of course, politics is a very strong force right now. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of good speeches, but not a lot of action.
Where do you see this going in the next few weeks, Scott?
Well, it looks like we're going to see some initial preliminary talks with the Europeans. There also are some NAFTA negotiations going on with Canada and Mexico. And so, again, those provide us with a potential off-ramp. But then, of course, the big question is China. The president has already imposed tariffs on $34 billion worth of imports from China. The Chinese have retaliated against a lot of American farm products and other exports. So it looks like we could get a break on the European and Canadian, Mexico, others on those steel and aluminum tariffs. But it looks like the China tariffs are going to be around for a little while.
Well, we will follow it with you, and thank you for joining us today. Scott Lincicome, his group is Republicans Fighting Tariffs. Thanks for calling. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.